What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video we are at Sioux Falls Regional Airport for the 68th airport update for the month of September 2025. It is happening. We have groundbreaking on the new terminal expansion that we are going to get. Very excited to follow this over the next little while, and I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But just a quick overview of the project. As you can tell, Gate 1 has been taken out of service. They've removed the jet bridge now. That's been put into storage and will be used again once the expansion is complete in the next year or two. So yeah, like I said, more details on that coming at the end of the video, so stick around because there's going to be a lot of exciting developments with that. We'll start off at Gate 3 with this Delta A319 on the MSP mainline service. Still a late night arrival that will then overnight leave the next morning on a bit of the RON turn, as they like to call it. This ride-in is flight 2748 at 11:10 p.m. delayed from its 10:44 p.m. scheduled arrival time. That delay marking at about 26 minutes. So good to see the main line still going strong here. And also for DFW, still getting some 319s. I have seen the occasional 321 Neo even show up on this main line, which is excellent. Love to see the increased capacity. The 320s as well have also appeared once or twice now. But predominantly it has been just the 319. This A319 with Sharklets arrived in from DFW as flight 2937, also delayed about an hour or so. This arrived in at 10:20 p.m. and most of the flights are from Thursday, the 18th of September. Moving on over, we have a couple United aircraft, actually 4 total in this update, 2 mainline and 2 regional services. There is a MAX up there as well, which is exciting for variety's sake. At the 7B apron, we have this Embraer 175 on the Denver turn, arriving in as flight 5700, a SkyWest service, one of the many overnight services that we have. This arrived in at 11:21 p.m., 19 minutes early. And then the MAX 8, also from the Mile High City. Been seeing this MAX 8 predominantly on the schedule. I talked about in last month's update that they were going to have a swap to the MAX 8, and that has been predominantly the case. So really excited to have the MAX 8 here on a regular basis now from one of the legacy carriers that has them. Obviously Delta doesn't have the MAX 8s, but we do have United and American. I wonder if American will ever send a 737 here, because they've never done that, minus a diversion we got once many years ago, and then maybe a charter or two has been thrown in there as well, way before I started spotting here on a regular basis. But this MAX 8 arrived in as flight 1117 at 8:23 p.m., and that is 6 minutes early. Our last United aircraft at the terminal over at Gate 6, always historically been a United gate along with 7. This United Express CRJ 550, this is actually a SkyWest service now. So SkyWest has been getting a lot of the CRJ 550s lately, and now that will be mostly the case here instead of GoJet, which has been predominantly the main operator and really the only operator of the CRJ 550 type. But this is now a SkyWest service, arriving in as flight 5635 from Chicago at 5:36 p.m., which is 9 minutes late. Not too bad there. And then the last service, sorry about the camera there, I had to raise the tripod above the existing terminal. And yes, with the terminal expansion, this entire terminal will be replaced once that is complete. So I will start, seriously looking into getting a 3D print of the new terminal once I have, all the designs and everything, once I get that all set up. So definitely look into that here in probably the next 12 months or so, once I really get settled down with school and all that, since I'll be done here pretty soon, which is exciting, but at the same time a bit surreal since it's gone by so quickly. Our last aircraft at the terminal, we have this Delta Connection CRJ 900. This arrived in from Minneapolis as flight 5234, an Endeavor service. And this arrived in at 11:59 a.m., 12 minutes early. So I'm going to swap the format up just a little bit here. So I'll save the updates on the terminal expansion until the very end of the video, so I'll just do my route roundup now just to get that over with. But like I said, main highlight here in this update is the MAX 8 service from Denver, which is always fun to see that in action. And if I go to the United section on our timetable, They will go back to a regular 737, but they will have the 900 on that service instead, and then they'll have about 3 to 4 additional express frequencies from there. And then Frontier in October, they're going to go 4 weekly with a Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Friday frequency, which works pretty well for if I were to do a trip this fall. I don't know if that's going to happen. Just working out a lot of different complications at this point, but if that doesn't happen, then I'll try to make a trip happen in the spring, just so that we've got something there. Vegas on Allegiant, that is up to 4 weekly, with also the same frequency as that Frontier Denver service. Phoenix on American, they still have the 1 daily, but they will go up to 2 starting next month. It will be October 7th that they will add a second frequency on the Embraer 175. Very exciting. And then Phoenix Mesa on Allegiant, pretty much all daily throughout the entire month. Tuesday, October 28th, for some reason, they won't have a flight on that day, but otherwise, the rest of the month, it's essentially daily, so that's also cool. And then DFW, the main line's always super fun to highlight. 2 daily with the additional Embraer 175, but it looks like they will up-gauge one of the mainline services regularly to an A320 next month. So that will also go in effect on the 7th. The other mainline service still on the 319, though I would not be shocked if they were to do a 320 and then a 321 or 321 Neo on the same day during this time. And then Minneapolis, no major changes to highlight, still the 1 mainline, and then about 3 to 5 extra Delta connection frequencies. American and United from Chicago, currently they have the CRJ 700 for American, and then as for United, they do have the 737-700 on the main line. I do have that flight in this update, which we'll look at in just a moment. And then otherwise, it'll be 2 to 3 daily of the CRJ 550, though they will go up to the 800 in October. Nashville, twice weekly, Monday, Friday. That's not too much different there. And then the Atlanta service, no changes there. Still the 1 daily through 19. And then for Orlando Sanford, that will restart in October. October 2nd is the first day back, and then it will go Sunday, Thursday on the A319. And then same goes for St. Petersburg. That restarts October 3rd. Also 319, though they will start to go up to the 320 and then eventually to the MAX 8. They'll have a couple services in there with that flight, with that aircraft. Punta Gorda resumes November 20th as well, and then that will go about twice-ish weekly. And then they have a 3rd service during the week of Christmas. And then Fort Lauderdale, that will start up December 19th, and the first flight on that will be the MAX 8. So exciting times for FSD as we get our seasonal services back on Allegiant. That St. Petersburg service was actually pretty decent. It is a very long flight. I think that might be our longest flight that we have. Well, if we factor in Fort Lauderdale, that one I think is just a little bit longer, probably by like 5 to 10 minutes. The difference I think would be very negotiable or negligible, I should say. That's a more proper word for this context. The difference is quite negligible in most contexts there. So, as we continue the update, we just have a handful of aircraft left, and then we'll get to the big developments here at FSD. We have the 737-700 Chicago mainline service taxiing in. Can't park at a gate right now. They do have boarding ramps now, or boarding stairs, which I do have one of them in this update, though not for a scheduled flight. It's actually for a charter that we have in this update. So this 737-700 arrived in as flight 1842 at 10:07 p.m., 5 minutes early. Always like seeing the little 700s come to stop by here. They're always very fun to spot. I haven't caught any of the... Because, of course, all the mainline stuff arrives by the time it gets dark, and with fall coming in, the sunsets are now earlier and earlier, and, you know, it just doesn't make for good spotting then when you're standing out there and all you can see is just the lights of the plane coming in. You know, you can see part of the livery, but it's not very fun. Embraer 175 for American Eagle, and this is the Phoenix Sky Harbor service, again going up to twice daily in October, which is very exciting. I did talk about this previously. This arrived in as, departing out to Phoenix as Flight 4991, a SkyWest service, at 2:55 p.m., 10 minutes late. And it's one of the newer SkyWest ones as well, November 508 Sierra Yankee. I'm surprised at Gemini. Hopefully they'll do a re-release of that, because now they're going to be... They seem to be on a trend towards American aircraft, so I have a feeling that if they're going to do another Embraer 175 for American Eagle, they will probably do one of the SkyWest ones, which will be very nice. I know that some collectors would be very happy to see that, especially if they're a little more keen-eyed for the registrations and whatnot. And then the final aircraft for this update is this Allegiant Charter, which arrived on Friday, September 19th. South Dakota State doesn't have any football games this weekend. It's their bye week. Next one will be next weekend, so there will be a charter there. We'll be excited to catch that. Allegiant A320 from Asheville, North Carolina. Don't know what university this would be for. I'm assuming it's a college sports charter. It's probably like USD or something. They probably have a football game this weekend, so I will just quickly verify the schedule. Of course, when this video goes out, that game will have long since passed. But they are actually hosting Drake the weekend before this video comes out, so that won't be much of an issue there for, you know, charter and all that, since Drake, they're from Des Moines. If you don't know, they can just take a bus up here, which is who SDSU also played recently. So Drake likes to have, they like to play some of the schools, because both of the USD, SDSU, and then you have like NDSU, which is also another big school in the FCS division. All three of them are in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, which is pretty much like, if you know college football well, it's like the SEC, the Southeastern Conference of the FCS. Is a very dominant conference with a lot of very strong talent at each of those schools. So yeah, Allegiant A320, Asheville, Flight 4400. Don't know who's on this, if this is just anything in particular. We just get these occasional Allegiant charters just because. And I know SDSU, when they do travel to play opponents, Allegiant is typically the airline that they use for the chartered services. All right, time for the big news that I have been excited to talk about for a long time. I've always hinted at it with the littlest of developments that I could get my hands on. But finally, the groundbreaking has happened for our terminal expansion. This happened on September 4th, and I'd love to have attended that, but of course I've got classes and other stuff to focus on, so I couldn't make it, but I did see some of the photos and some of the news coverage that they got. It looked pretty cool. So as I mentioned at the top of the video, Gate 1 has been cordoned off. That is closed and will not be in use for the duration of this project, and that'll be kind of this is pretty much the permanent end for the current Gate 1, which that's where a good handful of my journeys have started out of. When I flew Delta up to Minneapolis and then ended that trip, that was over to New York and Boston and all that in 2019. And then I did the Florida excursion last year. That started out of Gate 1, and then the Airliners expedition also started out of Gate 1. So some very, very memorable trips that have started out of that gate, and that gate is now gone. But there will certainly be some new memories to follow as we move forward. The project will see a net gain of 4 gates for the airport, which is going to be awesome. So we'll be, good increase on gates, so that will give us more capacity, obviously, and we definitely need some new services. I really hope we get some new stuff. Allegiant, unfortunately, they're shutting down their base at Los Angeles, and they're going to transfer some of their stuff up to Burbank, I believe. They're trying to expand out of there now, which will be interesting. So I hope that American Eagle, because I know they've got a decent regional jet representation there. They even have a whole terminal for the little guys to operate out of. I really hope we do get a Embraer 175 service out there, because I'd love just to go straight to LAX. I don't mind connecting to get there if I ever go there, but that service would obviously be great for my needs if I ever want to go out there. So really they're just focusing on getting the 4 gates built for this project, but some additional projects that I did hear discussed in the Sioux Falls business article, which is where I pulled this information out of. I'll link that in the description if you want to read that further. But the additional projects that they want to start if they get additional funding, because right now the current project cost is about $70 million. The additional costs for the other stuff that they want to do, that will certainly go up, and I think it's like about $100 million total or so, factoring in all the additional stuff that they want to do. But the additional projects that they want to build would be a large atrium, which will go in the place of the existing Gate 3. More hallway space. There's more space to walk around the terminal, because obviously the current facilities, it gets very crowded when you have multiple mainline aircraft on the ground simultaneously. I've seen that firsthand myself. The line just stretches out into the actual corridor, and there's barely any room to walk when you've got flights that are boarding, and the boarding process can be very slow with that. They also want to build an additional gate which will fit a customs and border protection facility for international flights. So very much a long-term thing for FSD to get regularly scheduled international flights, but I would assume that this would be more for like charters and stuff. Like if you want to there's a charter to Cancun or something, because I know we got those many, many years ago. I don't know how exactly they did that, or even like what aircraft they use. Because I saw a newspaper clipping of it a few years ago when I was going through some of my family's archives. They actually had just a newspaper story on, it was like Ryan International Airlines that had chartered flights to Mexico over the winter of about 2004 it was. So I don't know how they did that, but I think there was a separate CBP building on the grounds of the airport. But here they'd actually have one in the terminal, which they already do, but I think it's just outside of the actual secure area of the airport right now. But they'll move it here into the actual concourse itself. And of course, as I mentioned, all those additional projects will be pending additional funding that they get, which I think there's a really good chance that they could get it. Now that I think about it, there's definitely a need to grow this airport with such a growing city, as I've heard before. To have a growing city, you need a growing airport, and to have a growing airport, you need a growing city. And the latter so far is definitely something that we need. And the expected completion date for all this stuff will be March of 2027, so that will be, I don't know exactly how many months from now, but that'll be about, 16, 17 months roughly, something like that. Date could change if we get some really bad weather or something and that stops the project for a little while, but they're very confident the project will be completed before then. So very excited to see the opening of that. And once that opens, hopefully we'll get some new services. I know that they highlighted that they definitely still want Washington, D.C. That's been talked about off and on for the last couple years. Salt Lake City and Houston would also be great, and then just get some additional Allegiant services. Destin, Fort Walton Beach is a big one that I'd love to see. Some additional stuff in Florida, maybe like, Sarasota, Bradenton, that would be great. I know that's definitely a popular one as well. And, maybe something again out west if they still got something going on. And Orange County, Santa Ana, that'd also be great to see come back. And then San Diego we used to have, but they don't have that anymore. Maybe additional frequencies on Vegas or something, Phoenix. And then for like mainline, Atlanta would also be great to have some additional frequencies on that, since it's just the one daily mainline 319 at this point. And then just some of the other fun stuff that we could add, I've already mentioned Salt Lake and Houston. LAX, American Eagle, as I talked about before. That would also be super nice to see. And, maybe something on Alaska. Alaska would be a great airline to add here. Maybe something to Seattle or Portland on a 175 to start, and then you could go up to 737 if there's enough demand for it. And something to New York or Charlotte. I'd love to see the Charlotte service come back, because that returned for 2 months a couple years ago on the main line, and the flights were really full. In fact, the average load factor's been up in the 90s for a lot of, especially like the mainline stuff. It's been up in the 90s. So the flights are coming and going with a lot of passengers on board. So the projection is that the passenger numbers are going to be up again from 2024. I think we're up about 8-9%, somewhere around there, just on the year-to-date value, which is great. So this expansion's coming at a very great time. Would have loved to see it sooner, but obviously it takes time to get funding and all that, and there was some initial delays in getting that, but now they've got some of it. So very excited for that. And I will be covering the sort of development of this concourse, terminal expansion rather. And I don't have anything for it right now, since it's just they've dug out the ground, they've done some grading for it, and once October hits, I'll head up to the airport, get a quick shot of it just to see if there is anything noteworthy on the grounds of where the expansion is up to that point. But there certainly should still be a lot of fun stuff happening there right now, and then later on you'll see the construction of the actual building itself, and then the paving of the new concrete for the apron. They'll lay that down at some point. So it'll definitely be fun to follow this. So stay tuned for the monthly updates on this series. We had the parking garage one, which wrapped up about a year ago. Now we've got the terminal expansion to follow, which is going to be very fun. So like I said, this diorama is going to have to change long term. I've already planned, I've already thought about making those changes to this facility, but just really hasn't worked out. And now that we have this expansion going, now it's a really good time. Like, okay, I need to, put a new diorama in. So that will be something I will look at as we move forward, but it's not going to be something that I will do immediately. But once the new expansion opens, that will be put into place, and that will be featured in either the March or April 2027 FSD update, whenever the exact date of opening for this expansion is. So once we get closer, I'll have some more information on an exact date, since right now March 2027 is when they're expecting this to be completed, and then opening would be roughly around the same time, maybe in April or something, depending on where this project goes. So hope you enjoyed this month's FSD update. A lot of news with the expansion, and very excited for it. We finally got it going. So there's going to be some major changes coming to our airport, and this is something I've looked forward to for a long time. They've talked about expanding this airport for even going way back to like the 80s. They've always wanted to add a second concourse, but I think initially there just wasn't enough demand to support that, but now we're at a point where we have that demand, we have the numbers, we can support and justify getting these extra gates. So now that we've got that going, it's going to be a very fun time for us. So keep an eye out for the monthly updates for the next little over a year it will be. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.